Hello, hello, hello. Hi there. Hello, hello. Everybody hear me okay? Hello, hello. Let's just see here. I'd love a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Looks like I've got a little bit of a delay, but yeah, if you can hear me, give a thumbs up. That'd be great. Hello, hello everybody on this Monday. Hope everybody is well. If you are live, welcome. If you are watching on the replay, welcome as well, and I hope you learned something tonight. So let's just give a few minutes here. I want to let a few people hop in, and then we'll get started. Yeah, if you can, if everything is visible, hearing, and you can give me a thumbs up, that would be great. And then I will get started and kind of give you a rundown of what I got planned for tonight. And as always, I am open for questions and answers at any time. So if there's something that you have on your mind, something you're working on that you're struggling with or having, want some help with, leave it in the chat and I will get to it. Maybe note it with a Q or something to indicate that it's a question, and then I will get those as I go. But yeah, I want to just wait a couple seconds here to make sure everybody has enough time to get in, and then I will jump right into tonight's sort of focus. So it does look like I have a little bit of a delay going. I'm just checking a few things here. But let's just see what we got going on here. So tonight, I am going to show you how to animate in Adobe Photoshop. Last week we did in Adobe After Effects a really basic animation in Adobe After Effects. And this week I wanted to do kind of similar in Adobe Photoshop, which, a lot of people don't know you can animate in Photoshop or don't think about Photoshop as a tool for video or animation. And quite honestly, it's a little secret hack or a secret tool that is quite powerful. It's not nearly as intuitive or as sort of powerful in terms of what you're capable of doing compared to something like Adobe After Effects, but it's not really intended to be that way. But there are still a lot of features in Adobe Photoshop working with video and animation where you can get some pretty cool, you can do some great things with it. So what I thought I would do tonight was show you more or less how to do a very simple animation in Adobe Photoshop. Let's just see here. I will bring up I think I have a little demo here that I was going to bring up. Let's just see if I can find it. Yeah, so here is Adobe Photoshop, obviously. And let's just see if I can make this just a little bit bigger so you can see. So what we're going to be creating is this looping texture animation in the background and a very simple animation of this logo coming on and off the screen. It's all done within Photoshop. And I made the looping texture animation first, and then I just animated this logo using some position keyframes, which position keyframes are the backbone of animation, more or less, or the thing that you're going to use the most, especially when you're getting started. It's the same technique in Adobe After Effects as you would do in Photoshop in terms of creating keyframes. And the looping animation is a little bit of a, I would say, not a workaround, but something that, you can do it many different ways. There are many different ways to create this, and the way I did it tonight was really just a fast and easy way, which is more or less the way that I'm want to encourage people to do things as they're, needing a quick animation, or needing to post something on social media, or for their podcast episode or something, where I like to teach things, and I also like to create things where I can make them without feeling overwhelmed or feeling like I have to, spend days making some elaborate animation or a project. So something like this can be done in a matter of minutes. And what I'm going to teach you tonight is not necessarily, this is not a very fancy animation by any means. It's not really intended to be the final project that you base all your social animations on. It's really meant to show you this is possible in Photoshop in a matter of minutes, and to get your mind thinking of okay, so now I know how to do these basic techniques. Oh, maybe I could do that thing that I was thinking of doing, which is more or less the way that I learn everything. Start with something that you want to make, maybe, or something that you're thinking, God, I really want to do this for my video or my YouTube channel or my podcast or my Instagram posts. Start to think about what you want or what you're trying to do, and learn how to do those little things one by one. You don't have to do you don't have to be the greatest animator or video creator right from the beginning. Just start to build your toolbox up with just little things that you can do. And before long, if you keep making these things one by one, before long, your toolbox is going to be pretty full with things, and you're just going to be able to piece things together. So when you watch a tutorial, don't watch the tutorial for the finished product. Watch the tutorial for the little things, in the tutorial, or, when somebody's showing you something. That end product might not be what you want, but the way to make that end product might include steps or tools or, techniques that will help you build that thing you want. So that when I watch a tutorial, I'm never watching it for, oh, I really want to make that thing. I'm watching it because I think that maybe something they're doing is sort of similar to what I'm trying to create for something totally different. And if I learn a technique, I'll say, yeah, I think I could make that work for the, the project that I'm working for. So yeah, I encourage you to, sorry about that. I encourage you to, with everything you watch and learn, to not just think of, hey, I really want to do it like this, but to do it like, or to take pieces of things and build up your own way of doing things. So let's just see here. I'm trying to switch a camera to make sure that everything is working. So this camera is working, so that's good. And then we have should be a top-down camera. Alrighty, very good, very good. And then if you're not familiar with this guy, this is Adobe Character Animator, which is a very fun tool. And as I move, the character moves. And oops, I have it on mute, but as I speak, when I speak, the character is actually lip syncing whatever I'm saying. So this is a pretty cool tool, which I'll go into in another tutorial. But this is something that you can bring into your live streams, and sky's the limit with this. Very cool stuff. I have a future tutorial on how to do that. But today we're going to talk about Adobe Photoshop. So today, this is, let's just see, go back to the main screen here. So in Photoshop, again, this is what we're going to be creating tonight. A looping texture animation. This is just a paper texture. You can download these for free on Unsplash. All over the internet, you can find any type of paper texture. And then I have this animation, or this logo animating on, animating off. I'll zoom it out just a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Very, very simple stuff. And alrighty. And any questions or anything that you want me to go back and touch over along the way, just let me know. I'd be happy to explain anything, go over anything that you're not clear about, or just any questions that pop up. Throw them in the chat, and I will address those as they come. Okay, so let's hop into this. And your skill level for this can be very low in Adobe Photoshop. You do not need to be an advanced Photoshop user. You can be very, very beginner, very novice to start animating in Adobe Photoshop. So don't be intimidated by anything that we're going to be doing tonight, because this is pretty simple stuff. So the way we're going to break it down tonight is I'm going to start by animating the background, this looping texture animation. I do have a tutorial that came out recently on this of how to do the background from start to finish, but I'm going to do it exactly the same way tonight. And then once we're done creating the looping texture, I'm going to show you how to animate this logo on. And I just want to make sure there's no questions or no. Okay. And I am going to start from scratch. So we're going to try to make it look exactly like this or very close, but I am going to start from scratch so we can try to make it exactly step by step so you can see everything that I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to bring that in just a little bit. Okay, I think this is the same thing. This is the same, just using another texture. So you can use any texture that you have, any type of background that you want to animate. It doesn't have to be, this one is, why is it ending? I see what it's doing. Sorry about that. So this one is basically, I have a blank spot at the end, which is why it's going black. So this one's not a great example, but let's see, I can end that right there. I must have a empty space in the beginning, but that's okay. So you can use any texture that you want in the background. This was just an example I made up in the end. So I'm going to close these out, and we're going to start from scratch. We're going to start by creating a new document in Photoshop. That's File, New, or Command N will create a new document. I'm going to try to zoom in so you can see here a little bit better. 1920 by 1080 pixels is great. 72 resolution is fine. Click OK to create a new document. Okay. So we have a blank document. I'm going to go to my Adobe Creative Cloud libraries. If you're not using the CC libraries, I highly recommend it. This is basically a way that you can store all of the assets that you use over and over again. Logos, graphics, things that you use for your brand on a regular basis. You store them in your CC library. You can use them in all of the Adobe library, or all of the Adobe applications. Most of the applications do have the library. So if you're in After Effects, or if you're in Premiere, if you're in Illustrator, you have access to the same library. So if you're using your logo and all your graphics, they're all right there, so you don't have to go on your computer and find them. So definitely recommend the CC libraries. Take advantage of them. I'm just going to drag this texture file that I store in a texture folder, so I always have them, and I'm going to scale this up. I'm going to press the Option key so I can scale up from the center. And if you notice here, what I'm doing is I'm making this texture in the background bigger than the canvas. And the reason I'm doing that, I'm going to click the little check mark at the top to commit that. The reason I'm doing that is because we're going to be animating this texture into different positions, and you don't want the background to be seen. So you want to give yourself enough room so you can move it around without showing the background. So when you're doing a looping texture, whether you're in Photoshop, whether you're in Adobe After Effects, it's a good idea to make the background, the texture, actually bigger. Just scale it up. The resolution, it might diminish the quality just a little bit, but it's not going to matter for a looping texture. So scale it up, make it bigger. You can see here this is quite a bit bigger, so I have plenty of room here to move it around. The more you move it around, or as you move it around, it's just giving it the different position, gives it that kind of looping randomness, which is what you want in a looping animation. Okay, so here we go. We're going to come down to the very bottom. I'm going to try to zoom in, and let me just see here if this helps a little bit. I'm not sure it's helping all that much, but let's just see here if I can. Hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. So there's a little drop down menu here at the very bottom of the timeline. When you're doing the timeline, it's very small at the bottom of Photoshop, and unless you're on the video timeline, you can't extend it up. So it's hard for me to demonstrate this, so I'm being very careful that you can actually see everything on this live stream. So hopefully I get it all in, and if somebody doesn't see something, then please let me know. But you see this little drop down menu right here. If you click on that, you have two options to animate in Photoshop. You have the video timeline, and then you have the frame by frame animation. Okay, so the frame by frame is going to be really one frame, you do something, next frame, you do something. It's very much like a hand-drawn animation that you would do in something like stop motion, where each frame you're animating something different, and they play all the frames, and that's what makes the video. If you choose the video timeline, that's going to be more like a video editor that you would do in Adobe Premiere Pro or ScreenFlow or some, a video editor where it's really more of, clips that you're putting on a timeline. For the looping texture, I'm going to start with the frame by frame animation. So the way you do that is you select it from the drop down, so from this drop down, and then you have to click on the button, and that's going to create the timeline. So I'm going to click, and that creates the timeline. And give me just a second, because this is where it hides it in Photoshop. It makes it pretty small on the bottom, and I'm going to try to zoom in here as best I can so you can see it on the screen. So hopefully you can see that pretty well. So there's just this one little clip down here on the very bottom. I'm not seeing my screen, so let me just make sure. So there you go. So there's just that one frame right now. And what we're going to do is create a frame, and then each frame we're going to change the position of the texture. So that's how we're going to get the loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. It's not going to allow me to really zoom back and forth. So again, I'm going to be very conscious that you can see everything, but let me just, it's going to take a little trickery of me moving the screen around. So what we're going to do is the first frame, we're going to keep it in place, okay? Then we're going to come down here. You'll see this little plus symbol down in the bottom. On the far right here, there's a little plus icon. And when you click that, that adds a frame, okay? So we click, and that adds a frame. So now, I'm just going to come up to Photoshop. So let me just zoom out a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we have the timeline on the bottom, right? So let me move this over a little bit. I'm going to move me out of the way here. So let me just move me out of the way. So we've created the second frame, and now we need to move this texture. So I am just going to simply, with the Move tool selected in Photoshop, that's keyboard shortcut V for the Move tool, or it's the tool in the top left corner, I'm just going to simply click and move. You can move it as little or as much as you want, but you don't have to move it that much to make the animation. So I just moved it a little. Then we're going to come down to the timeline again. I'm going to click on the little plus icon to add another frame. So I'm going to click, that adds a frame. I'm going to come back with the Move tool. You can see my cursor is the Move tool. Let me just zoom back out so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to click right on the texture and just move it. So I had moved it a little bit to the left and up. Now I'm just moving a little bit to the right and over. And I'm looking around the edges because you do not want to show the background. Otherwise, it's going to make a really like a flashy jolt. Like you're going to really notice it if you move it. So you don't want to move that background. I'm going to come back down to the timeline. So I'll zoom back in the timeline. Hopefully you can see this. Let me just zoom that way in there. Okay, so you should see that. I'm going to go down to that bottom right. I'm going to click on the plus icon to add another frame. So now we have 4 frames. I'm going to go back to the top here. So I'm in Photoshop. I'll zoom back out. I'm just going to click, and I'm going to move it. I'll come back down to the bottom. I'm going to click to add another frame. I'm going to go back up to the texture, and I'm going to move it. So now we have 5 frames, okay? So let's just move this in. So we have 5 frames total. And what we need to do is tell Photoshop what we want or how fast we want this to move. So if I zoom back out here, let me just move to the main thing. So if I move out here, if I press the space bar to preview this animation, you should be able to see movement. I'll zoom up a little bit. I'm going to press the space bar, and just doing what we did already, we have a looping texture animation. So this is pretty cool in itself. You just created an animation in a matter of a minute. Just by creating 5 frames, we didn't even add any extra layers in the layers panel. If you look over to the right, you'll see there's just the 1 layer. So pretty cool that you're able to do it this quick, but you see it's moving kind of quick. So what I'm going to do is I'll zoom back in again so you can see it. I'm going to select all 5 frames. I'll press on 1 frame in the end. I'll press the Shift key so all 5 are selected. Then I'm going to click on a little drop down. You see where it says 0 seconds? I'm just going to click that, and I'm going to change it to 0.1. You could play with any of these to check it, but I'm going to press 0.1. I'm going to press play, and now we have ourselves a looping texture animation. Pretty simple. Okay, I'm going to press the space bar to stop, and I'll zoom back out. Check for a second to see if there's any questions. Okay. Let me just do. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, now that we have the background set, we're now going to go in and we're going to do the logo, but I'm going to go from a frame by frame animation, and now I'm going to create a video timeline. So we're on the frame animation timeline. We're going to switch this to a video timeline. That's where we're going to use that's where we're going to add the logo and use keyframes. So this is a little bit of a trickery hack, if you will, going from a frame by frame to the video timeline. But this is the looping animation, I think, is easier to do as a frame by frame. So we can easily switch from frame to video timeline, and I'll show you how to do that. So if I zoom in here, we are now on the timeline. So let me get way in there because I want to show you a little trick. So we have 5 frames. If you look in the very bottom corner of Photoshop, there's 3 little dots down there, or 3 little lines. If I hover my cursor, I don't know if it's going to show you. I can't get any more room down there. So let me just let me do one more thing and see if I get lucky. But I think you're just going to have to take my word for it. But so look next to the word where it says forever. And you'll see there's it's the 3 little lines with it through it. You can see it says convert to video timeline. So if you click that, it's going to convert this frame by frame animation into a video timeline. You can also come over here. So let me get myself out of the way here. Come over here. So I'm on the right side of the timeline. This is on the top right side of the timeline. You see this little hamburger menu right above. It's right below the texture. So if you see my cursor right here, these little hamburger menu, the 3 little horizontal lines. If I click on that, you see I have the option convert to video timeline. So you can go to this menu and select it, or you can go back in the bottom left corner under the timeline and click that little icon for video timeline. I'm going to click. I'll zoom back out here. And now we have a video timeline. So if I zoom in here, so we're going to move it back to the other side. Hopefully you're not getting dizzy from me moving around, but I knew this was going to be a little bit tricky. with the timelines, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. So now we have, instead of the frame by frame animation, we have ourselves a video timeline, which is, if you're doing any type of video editing, this should look familiar to you. This is, you're going to build your frame animation or your video animation just like, or your video timeline, just like you would, with other software where you would add clips. Works a little bit different in Photoshop, but it's the same concept. Alrighty, so I'm going to come over here. One little thing here that we're going to do. We're going to make copies of this looping animation. So since we only did 5 frames, that's really only creating, it's only creating, not even a second's worth of animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little button here on the layer. Let me move me out of the way so you can see better. I'm going to click on this little icon right here. Looks like a little film strip. It's next to the paper texture. I'm going to click that. Let me select it first. Click it. So that's an important thing here. Let me deselect it here so you can see what I did. You have to first select the layer. And you can also select the layer in the Layers panel of Photoshop. So on the right side, you can select the layer. It's the same thing, but it must be selected. You're going to click on this little drop down, and you're going to select New Video Group from Clips. And what the video group is going to do is that every time you add something to the group, it's going to keep it on the same track versus stacking them on each individual tracks above each other. When you create a video group, anything you add to that video group stays on the same track. So that's going to be very important. It looks pretty small here, but I'm going to zoom in here, and now you can see that we've got just this one video, our texture looping animation. It's going to the 15 frame mark. Let me get me out of the way here. See here, we've got one clip here, and it's going to 15 frames. But we're going to make a 5-second animation. So what we basically need to do is extend this timeline. So I'm just checking to see if there's any questions or anything, but okay, we're going to move along here. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what's going on. Let's go full screen UI. Okay, so now we have this one layer here. It's on this one track, and again, this is in a video group. So what I'm going to do, I'll move me out of the way. Move me over here. I'm going to zoom into the, let's see if I can zoom into the Layers panel here. Let's try this. Okay, hopefully you can see that. What I really want to show you is over here in the Layers panel, we just have this. It's basically everything you see in the Layers panel in Photoshop, you're going to see on the timeline. So we have this video group. If I would uncheck this, if I uncheck the layer, it's going to hide the visibility of that Photoshop layer. It's a little hard to see since the background is white, but I just hid that. And you can see here, it's a video group. So it's just like any other, group that you put together in Photoshop. In fact, it's a very good idea to label everything so you don't get confused. So I'm going to call this paper texture. Okay. We don't really need the background, but I'm just going to keep it there. It's not doing any harm. So what I'm going to do is make a duplicate of this layer. Okay. So let me zoom out a little bit so I can show you the bottom. On the very bottom, you can make a duplicate. You can also hold the Option key or the Alt key on PC and just click the layer. But what I'm going to do is just select the layer, and I'm going to drag it down to this plus icon in the bottom right, and that is going to make a duplicate of that layer. Now, if you were looking down at the bottom, let me just come down here. When I made a duplicate, so let's get me out of there. When I made a duplicate of that layer in the video group, you can see what it did was it created a copy and it kept it on the same track. Since it's in a video group, it's keeping it on that track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make copies, and just because it's an endlessly looping animation, I can just keep making copies of this until I get to like the 5-second mark, which is random. It doesn't have to be 5 seconds, but that's a good, good time frame for a little simple animation. So I'm just going to make copies of this looping texture by duplicating the layer in the video group, and that's just going to add it one by one consecutively on the same track. So are we following that? Hopefully that's makes clear of why we're doing that. So let me I'm going to change this up and go over here. Hopefully you can see this might be a good view for everybody to see. So I'm going to go over to the layers panel. So we've got 2 copies. I'm just going to click on this layer. I'm going to drag it down to the plus icon and let go. You may not have seen that. Let's just see if I can zoom this out a little bit. So I'll do that again. So what I did was drag the layer, drag it down to the bottom. There's a little plus icon down there. When I let go, that creates a duplicate and it adds a video copy, a video layer clip right onto the timeline. So we're at the 2-second mark. I'm going to bring this out to 5 seconds. A little shortcut key, rather than clicking and dragging, which, if you're doing it without talking, it doesn't take long at all. But holding the Option key on a Mac or Alt on a PC, pressing Option J, let's see, select the layer, or excuse me, Command J. You see here what it did was created a layer, but for whatever reason, when in Photoshop in the animation, what it does is it creates the full time frame, which we don't want. I'm going to undo that. So rather than Command J, which is a typical way to delete a layer, hold the Option key, click on the layer, and just drag it up, and that makes a duplicate. I don't know why that's the case. Copying the layer or duplicating the layer with Command J, which is the way I typically do everything in Photoshop. When you do that, it makes a full 5-second clip, and we only want this. We want to keep the clips the same length. So a weird oddity. There might be a reason why it does that. So either hold the Option key, click and drag, or select a layer and come down to the bottom and add a duplicate like that. And again, all we're doing is we're getting to the 5-second mark. Option key, click, or click, drag down to the plus. I'm doing it both ways just so you can see it. Option key, click. Okay, so now we're at the 5-second mark. Perfect, okay? If I press the space bar, you can see here, now we have a looping animation, which we had before, but it's going the full 5 seconds of this timeline. Pretty cool. You could be done right here. This could be all you want to do is create a 5-second looping animation. And if that's the case, then you're done. And what you can do, you could just go up to Photoshop, or to the File menu, go to Export, Render Video, and render out a looping texture animation that you can use in your video projects in After Effects or Premiere. You can overlay it onto something and just use this as an endlessly looping paper texture. Why, hello, Catherine. That's awesome. I don't know why I am not showing up for some reason. On my screen, I'm not showing up as myself, but Mohammed, welcome, welcome. Muhammad is asking, wondering how to use it in whiteboard animation. I might need a little more clarification of what it is you're wanting to do, or what you're thinking about doing, I guess. You know, are you thinking about, are you asking Muhammad how you can use this texture in a whiteboard animation? In which case, if you're able to add a background layer and whatever you're using to create the no problem. So all we're doing right now is we created the background, and I'm about to create a animating logo that just goes across the background. So tonight's real purpose, for those that are joining late, or that you just get in here, welcome, by the way. But let me just pull this up here so I can see you. So all I'm doing tonight is showing you how to create a real simple animation in Adobe Photoshop. And the main purpose of this is not so much what I'm creating is anything spectacular. I'm really trying to show you that you can easily jump into Photoshop, because a lot of people have Photoshop knowledge, and you can create something like this that's really easy to do. Or let me jump into the other screen here. This is what the finished product looked like. Again, nothing crazy here, but if you need to make a quick little social media post for something, you can easily do this while you're creating a thumbnail for your YouTube video in Photoshop. So I think a lot of people forget or don't even know that Photoshop is capable of creating animations. You can create really powerful animations in Photoshop. So if you have Photoshop knowledge, if you're in Photoshop, even if you're not that familiar with Photoshop or that advanced in Photoshop, there's still quite a bit you can do. Okay, so Muhammad's asking about the texture animation for whiteboard animation. So really, I don't have a good answer other than if you're able to create a background, if you're able to place a background, an animated GIF or a video file as a background, or if you're able to overlay it, whatever you're using, if you're able to overlay something, a looping video, where you can change the blend mode, change the background, add some grit, then you can easily, you can put something like this and use it in your animation, whether it's a whiteboard animation or whether it's, something else. It's really, changing the blend, putting this over something and changing the blend mode will give you that, movement. It'll give you some grit. It really depends what you're working with, or, what solution. So anyways, okay, maybe I missed it. Okay. Awesome. I hopefully that makes sense. So we've finished the looping animation part, or the texture background, and then we just have these layers. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Actually, this is probably as zoomed out as it's going to get with, yeah, so I'm in full screen here. So if you look at the bottom on the timeline here in Photoshop, this video group right here, this paper texture video group, has all of the animations to, let's see, it goes to 5 seconds long, and this is just one group here. And if you look over in the layers panel, I can collapse that. I'm going to stop that so I can collapse. For some reason I'm slowing down, so I can collapse that, and I just have one folder of all these texture files. So now I'm going to come up to my CC library. I mentioned this earlier. If you're not using the Photoshop CC libraries, I highly recommend it. Let me go to, let me see if I can, I think I just butchered that a little bit to make it hard. So I'm trying to make it so you can see these nice and clear. So in the top right corner is where I keep my CC libraries, and basically they're just a folder of assets that I can put anything I want in there. I can put color swatches, I can put graphics, I can put, you know, fonts, I can put things that I'm working on, which is great, especially if you're doing client work or you're doing projects. You can create a library for a client, put all of their logos in there. So if you're designing something, you don't have to go back and forth to your hard drive. You can just jump into your Photoshop library, drag your assets right onto your projects. The libraries are the same in all of the Adobe programs. So if you're working in Photoshop and you hop into Adobe After Effects, the same project files are going to be there. So you can just, you know, grab a logo, grab a color. One of the biggest time savers, and I'm very thankful for those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go zoom out a little bit here so you can see the full timeline. I'm basically trying to move my picture on here so I don't get in the way of everything. And I am just going to drag this one logo here from the top in my library. I'm just going to drag it onto here. It's a little big. I'm going to zoom out here. I have the Option key pressed, Alt on PC to zoom or to scale it up from the center. So you see here, I'm just going to get it to a size that looks good proportion. I'm going to hit Command Enter to commit the free transform. And now I have this logo sitting in the middle. If you look down at the bottom, it created a logo or created a layer on the timeline. So just like anything else, if you look over in the layers panel, the layers on the timeline are going to follow the layers in the layers panel. So if I was to drag this logo layer below the paper texture, it's going to move that way on the timeline. But I want it above because we want to see it. So you will not see it if it's below the texture layer. And hopefully you know that. But if you're very, very familiar or very, very new to Photoshop, then that might be something that you're not sure why you can't see something. The layers on top are going to be visible above the layers below it. So you want to make sure that. I'm just going to do a little check here to make sure everybody's good. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to animate this logo. Nothing special here, but I just want to show you how to make something move in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I have the move tool selected. That's what my cursor is. The arrow with the little, you know, the 4 arrows there. You get that by hitting the letter V. So V is the move tool. You can see here I've got something else. If I tap on V, now I've got the move tool. You can also get to it if you click in the top left corner. You should see the move tool. I can make sure that it's selected the layer. I'm on this layer. I'm going to move it over to the left because I want this to animate from the left. I want it to stop in the middle, hold for a little bit, and then I want it to move over to the right. That's it. Very, very simple position keyframe animation. So I'm going to start on the end. And again, if you're new to Photoshop, if I want to keep this in line, in proportion, so it doesn't go up and down when I move it, I'm going to press the Shift key, and that allows me to move it, and I can't move it up and down. So I'm not going to lose, I'm not going to lose its position on that axis. I'm just going to be able to move it off to the center. I'm holding the Shift key so it doesn't go up or down. And I just want it so I cannot see it, so it's off the canvas just a little bit. So if I hit the Command T for free transform, you can see that's where that graphic is right now. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'll zoom in on the timeline so you can see it. So let me just zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to twirl this open. So this layer is the logo layer. You can see here we have some keyframes. Here's our little playhead right here, or the current time indicator, okay? So this is what you would use to drag, to preview your video, okay? Just like you would on any other video editor. So if you're using something else, this is the playhead or the current time indicator, CTI, you might see it called. I'm going to add a keyframe. So I have the logo at the end of, or outside of the frame here. That's where I want it to start. So I'm going to add a keyframe. There's no movement when you add the keyframe. The movement is between the keyframe that you add, and then the next time you move that thing is going to be create the movement. So let me just explain here by doing it. I'm going to click on this little stopwatch. That adds a keyframe. So you see here, if I click on that, and if I move the little current time indicator, you can see that little diamond. That is a keyframe, okay? I'm going to zoom back out here, so I want you to be able to see what we have going on. So we now have a keyframe. I'm going to come up here, and I want to make a move. Well, first I want to move the playhead to a place on the timeline where I want the movement to go to, okay? So let me go back. Actually, I'll zoom back into the timeline so you can see that. So what I'm going to do is drag the playhead forward in time, and you can just pick a time. You don't have to be perfect the first time. You can always adjust the keyframes after you create them, but the basic step is you create a keyframe to where you're starting. Again, there are different techniques. Sometimes you do it in reverse, but I'm trying to keep things pretty simple. So then you move the playhead forward in time. You don't have to click that stopwatch again. When you make a movement, when you're animating something, when you create a keyframe, you move the playhead. When you make a movement, so when you move something on the canvas, when you let go of that, when you stop the movement, basically, it's going to automatically create another keyframe, okay? So what I'm going to do is select, I have the move tool selected. I'm just going to move that graphic holding the shift key, and I'm going to drag it to the middle. So I'm right in this, oops, I realize you can't see it, so let me zoom out, and I'll do that over, okay? So I'm going to come up here. I have my playhead in the right spot. I have the first keyframe created. I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to hold this shift key so it doesn't go up or down. It stays in the same plane. I'm going to drag it until I get to the center. I'm using the smart guides. You can see now I know that I'm right in the center, and I'm going to let go of the cursor. So I just basically let go of the cursor on my mouse. If I drag the playhead back to the beginning, you're going to see the graphic move. So that means that we created a keyframe, or we created movement from one keyframe to the next keyframe. And basically what happens is, in between the two keyframes, Photoshop does what's called tweening, and that tweening means Photoshop calculates the movement between the two keyframes, which is kind of the magic of keyframing. So you just have to create the start and the end, and the program is going to automatically calculate the movements in between. Pretty cool. And of course you can add other keyframes, and you can, lots of things you can do. But if I press the space bar, we have an animation from the left side to the center. All right. I'm going to take a little sip of water. So everybody take a water break if you need it. Alrighty. So now we're in the center. I want it to hold on the center a little bit. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'll zoom into the timeline again, just to make it easier for you to see. I really want you to be able to see the movements. So we have two keyframes. I wish I could get this a little bit more so you could see it. It's really hard for me to do with this the way the keyframes go. But basically, you see here, when I move in between these two keyframes, this is where the animation is right now. When it gets to this keyframe, there's no more keyframes after this. So let me just move this a little bit. Yeah, that's not allowing me to do it. Let me see if I can move this just a little bit. Yeah, it's not allowing me to move it. That's okay. So what I want to do is just go forward in time a little bit. I'll go to this 2-second mark here. I'm going to come down here. Don't click the stopwatch. If you click the stopwatch, that's going to delete all of the keyframes. What you want to do is click this little diamond shape in between the two arrows. That will add a keyframe. So if there's no movement that you're working between, like if you haven't made a movement before and you're creating the automatic keyframes, to add a keyframe manually, you just click on this little plus you can see here, add or remove a keyframe. So if I just click, now you see here under the playhead, we just created a keyframe. So what I did was, we have movement from here to here, and I'll zoom back out so you can see really what I'm doing, but we have movement, and I want it to hold in the middle. So I basically want people to see the logo for a little bit. So I created a keyframe at the same position as this. So in between here and here, there's no movement. So basically that's just going to make it stand still. Now, let me see if that will allow me to show you. Let's see if that will allow me. I might have to zoom back out. You can see here, I can also turn this into a hold keyframe, which is sort of for another more complicated thing. I could make this a hold keyframe, but in my case, I just created a second keyframe, which is doing the exact same thing. And now I can actually control how long I want the hold. So here, it's only going to hold for this amount of time if I create movement after this, or I can space them out and basically make it hold as long as I want. And hopefully that makes sense, but I think it might when I zoom back out here. Alright, so let me go down here. I'm swapping screens here, so bear with me. Okay, so let's just recap what we have here. We have the time, or the current time indicator of the playhead is at the very beginning of the timeline. I'm going to drag this in, and it's going to stop at the center. And I've got the second keyframe that's telling it, basically I'm saying I want it to hold between this keyframe and this keyframe because I want to create another animation that has it go off. So I'll create a keyframe after this one where the movement, where the logo goes off the screen. But I'm using these two keyframes here as my hold keyframes that I can, you know, as I make the keyframe, or, you know, after I finish the animation, that's when you really set your timing. So you really fine tune it to make sure that it's flowing the way you want. But I can use these keyframes now. It's just a really easy way for me to determine how long I want it to hold and when I want to end the hold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the playhead, let's say to this 4-second mark. I'm just randomly picking a time here. I'm just going to click on the graphic here. I'm going to hold the shift key so it doesn't go up and down. And I'm just going to drag this off until I can't see it. So it's just off the canvas here, okay? I'm going to let go. And if you look down on the keyframe, or on the timeline, it automatically created the 4th keyframe. And you can see here, as I'm dragging the playhead, it's previewing you the movement. So it's showing you first keyframe comes on. When it gets to the second keyframe, it's right in the middle of the canvas. It's holding. It holds until it gets to this keyframe. And then the movement is going to the last keyframe. Okay, so let's say that I want this to hold a little bit longer. I can come down here. Let's just say that I want this to hold a little bit longer. So I'm in between the second and third keyframe. I could just simply, oops. You don't want to have them selected. You just want to have one selected. The further apart the keyframes, the slower or the longer the keyframe is going to move. Or if you're holding, the longer that's going to hold. The closer together the keyframes are, the faster the animation or the slower amount of duration of hold. So hopefully that is clear. So this could be a long time. I'm going to go back to the beginning and press the space bar to preview. We come on, we hold, gets to that third keyframe, and then moves off. And this is just going to loop like this over and over and over again. This is nothing special. This is a very simple animation, but again, the point of tonight's tutorial is not necessarily to make really a anything fancy. It's really just to get you thinking, oh, I could actually just easily make this move. So here we go. I slowed it down a little bit by moving the keyframes further apart. You can see it adds a little bit of a different feel to it. So it comes on, holds for a little bit, and goes off. Easy as that. If we come over here, let's see if I can, let's do this. I'm gonna move in here a little bit so I can, give me just a second here. So let me, I want to get into this side here, so hopefully you can see this. So when you're doing timeline animation in Photoshop, on this right side here, you can see here there's a little hamburger menu. If you click on that, here you're going to have some options. Not all of these are going to be very intuitive at first, so I really recommend you just kind of exploring the different options. Photoshop animation is not, it's a little bit different. It's not the easiest at first. You know, some of it's really obvious where it is. Some of it is just, you just have to do what is available. Quite honestly, it has some really cool little hidden things, but it's not, endlessly flexible or customizable. There are some really great plugins. There's one that I'm forgetting the name of it right at the current moment, but there's a very popular animation plugin that just makes it basically, it makes the things that Photoshop really should have for the timeline, really basic stuff. It just makes it easier. It makes it a little bit more like After Effects. But so there are third-party plugins, but I do recommend that you just go through this menu. Again, it's this little hamburger menu here, and just start to experiment or just start to explore what things are possible. You'll find things like splitting at the playhead, trimming, converting the frames, and creating the work area, like slimming down your timeline. So different things like this. But one thing I wanted to point out here is the timeline frame rate. So if I click that, I can change the frame rate of this animation. So 30 frames per second is going to give you a smooth animation. If you put it down to something like 12 or 15, so if I do it down to 15, or down to 12, let's say, this is going to give us more of like a stop motion type feel. So let me just move this in here. I'll move me out of the way a little bit. So I'll press the space bar here. It might be hard to tell with this animation because there's really not a lot going on. But with the 15 frames per second, actually the animation, the texture logo, or the texture loop, I can tell it's a little more choppy. So it gives it, I love stop motion, and I love the hand-drawn feel of an animation. So I do like to have a low frame rate with a lot of things. So I'm generally one that likes to be in the 12, 15 frames per second, sometimes even lower depending on what it is, because I like that hand-drawn look. But if you want a smoother animation, then you would, come down here. Let's see if I can do this while you're, so I would come down here, I would click on this little hamburger menu. I'm going to go to this timeline frame rate. And again, you can choose, all the different frame rates. 30 frames per second was what it was at, so I'll click on that. I'll zoom out a little bit. Let's see here if I can. I'm trying to get the best of both worlds here, but let's see without getting greedy. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, that might work. I'll move me out of the way. I'll hit the space bar. Yeah, so now we're on the 30 frames per second. And with this type of animation, it's a little hard for you probably to see because it's not a lot of movement. But I can tell that the background is moving a little smoother versus it's starting to get a little choppy with that lower frame rate. So now I am wanting to ask or wanting to take any questions. Let's see if I can do this. We'll see how this goes. I might be in trouble here with one of these, but we'll see how that goes. So how about any questions from anybody? Does anybody not sure of any steps that I took or want me to cover anything? I'm going to ask, is there any of your tutorials to learn animation in Photoshop from scratch? Well, what you learned tonight is definitely a from scratch. And on my channel, I don't have any. I do have a few like tonight in short form. So if you watch my tutorials long enough, you'll know that my videos are short. And they're short for a reason, because I like to do really focused. Oops, don't know why that's going like that. We're going to get rid of that one. I don't think it has my right camera, so sorry about that. But yeah, so basically, I don't have any long tutorials, Mohammed, on my channel for starting from scratch to something where it's going to really give you a start. I will tell you and tell everybody that I am very, very focused and trying very hard to create some short form classes about all the topics that I teach, putting them together into more. They're going to be in my style of short and to the point tutorials or classes, but I'm trying to put together some things like, like this, but in a more of a class format, to where I'm not rambling or not, speaking in conversation, but really where you can watch these classes in, a short amount of time, but learn projects that you want to do. So I'm really working hard, or it's really a priority of mine to try to get some of these out. And I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be helpful for people who are trying to do more project-based learning from me versus, learning individual steps. I do try to keep my stuff relevant, or I try to keep things that I think you can build on to do bigger things. I am conscious of, if you learn something really small, I want that something small to actually be, something that you can use in the bigger picture thing. So I am conscious of that, I would say, or hopefully that makes sense. Let's see here. I don't know what I got going on with that, but let's just see what just happened. I think I'm not sure why this is not moving. So let's see if there's anything else here. For whatever reason, this is not rotating, but it's okay. Yeah, so with tonight's Photoshop tutorial on animation, let me just go back to maybe what we created here. Let's just see here. So we've got, this is what we created. A looping texture animation. I started the looping texture animation as a frame by frame animation in Photoshop, and once I created the loop that was I created the actual loop with only 5 frames, and then I converted that into a video timeline, and the video timeline allowed me to extend the frame animation by just simply making copies of it. It's let's say it's not a hack or not a real workaround, but just a real easy way of doing it. I could have easily taken a video file. There's endless looping textures that you can download for free. You could just take a video file, a movie file, and literally just drag it right on top of the timeline here, and that would do the exact same thing as this looping texture. So I showed you how to do it from scratch, but you don't have to do it from scratch. You could drag a video file right onto this timeline. That would be your background, and then you could just use an animation. Let me see here if I've got this. This is another one. I did this one a little bit more in, you can tell it's got a little bit more of a stop motion feel. It's got that jerky feel, but it's basically the same thing. It's just a very, very simple. Oh, that's not looping. Let me see if that's. Give me a second here. Yeah, so this is just a really, again, it's a basic, but if you can tell from the background, it's got that kind of jumpy stop motion feel to it. But again, this is done in a matter of minutes in Photoshop. And, if you just need something to put on a social media channel, or you're just goofing around with your graphics and you want to share something on your Instagram stories or whatever the case, this is an easy thing to do. Yeah, that's and here's the one that we did tonight. I think this one had a little more, I put a little, oh, that's something I need to point out. So if you look at this one, there's a drop shadow. This one's moving a little too fast for my tastes. But if you look at the logo, there's an actual drop shadow on it, and there's also some sort of grit, or it's really just transparency so you can see through the background. Yeah, this one's moving too fast. But I'll show you here if we go into Photoshop. So if I come over here, so let me just move this in. So we've got our animation. So there's no drop shadow on this, as you can see. We're going to change that. I am going to, let's zoom in here so we can, hopefully I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but let's just see. Okay, this might work if I can get me out of the way. Let's see if I can go. I'll put myself right there. Okay, so here's the layers panel over here on the right side. Okay, so you can see my cursor. This is the logo. Okay, so there's the logo. If I wanted to add a drop shadow, so this is a video, remember, we've already animated this, but the cool thing about Photoshop is that you can easily add all of the things that you do in Photoshop, all the stylization, you can do color changes, you can do things in Photoshop that you would do to any other graphic, you can have them on your video file. So to add an effect, I am going to double click on the right side of this layer. You could also come to the bottom and click on the FX, but if you're a Photoshop master or wannabe master, the fast way of doing it is just double click on the right side of the layer, and that will open up the layer styles. Okay. I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm just going to simply click on the word drop shadow. That automatically selects it. I can come over here and customize it. Or another pro tip, if you just click right on the graphic, you can actually just adjust the layer. A lot of people don't know this, but you can just move the drop shadow just by simply clicking on it and moving it. So you can get it exactly the way you want it without having to come over here and use these dials that you may not know how they work. So just simply click, and now you can move your drop shadow anywhere you want it. And if you move it, you look at the little dials over there, they're actually moving, but sometimes it's kind of hard to manually do it if you don't really know what they mean. But when you just simply click and drag, much easier. So I like subtle drop shadows. I really like a nice subtle drop shadow. I like it to come down to the bottom right a little bit. And then you'll play with the opacity. I have this dark blue, which is my logo color, but you can use a black if you want to use that. And then I like to use the opacity. The best thing about drop shadow, or good drop shadows, it depends on the application, but subtle goes a long way in a drop shadow. The one that you saw before was pretty heavy. And again, sometimes it's a stylish thing, or a stylistic choice that you want it to be heavy on purpose. Could be over dramatic, but in a lot of cases, if you're trying to have a nice drop shadow, subtle is much better. I'm going to come up here and click on blending options, and down here there's this blend if sliders. These are magical. If you press the option key, well, let's see, if I drag this to the left here, you can see here it sort of changes the opacity. If I press the option key, what it does is it splits this, so you can make a real fine-tune adjustment. So I'm pressing the option key, that's Alt if you're using a PC, and I'm just going to simply click and drag this. You can see it's changing the opacity of that layer. It's changing the fill opacity. If I do the same to the bottom one here, option, click, you're going to get different looks. So sometimes you just want to experiment. This bottom one is getting me more of the look that I want. So what's happening as I move it, the background is basically coming through the graphic. So it gives it a nice grungy, gritty texture. I love using the blend if sliders. Sometimes it just really takes some experiment. You don't want to go too far, but really what that's doing is just pulling the background through the layer, so it gives it a nice gritty, grungy look. And if I click OK, now I've got a drop shadow. If I press the space bar, we've got ourselves a looping texture animation with a keyframe, position keyframe logo. If I want to slow it down, all I do is drag the keyframes further apart, and that slows it down. Pretty cool. Muhammad's going to put me on the spot here and ask me a Windows question. What recommendation configuration would you give for Windows PC? How do you mean? Do you mean the actual, if you're asking me for recommendations on the actual device you should buy, I probably am not going to be I'm probably not going to be your best candidate if you're asking me for a PC recommendation, because I am definitely not the person you want advice for PC on. I can help you with any type of issue you're having trouble using for Windows to Mac type thing, but in terms of the actual recommendation of setups or configurations related to the hardware, you'd be better off. There's probably a lot of people who would be better off helping you than me. It's just I've been, I help a lot of people with their tech. I help a lot of people who have Windows machines, so I'm familiar with them. I know how they work. I had them years ago, so I'm not unfamiliar with them, but I'm definitely a longtime Mac user, and wouldn't be able to give you the best advice without. I would basically just be Googling things and try to use my judgment. So hopefully, but yeah, if you're like have a tech question related to it, or if there's something you're not sure if it would maybe work and you wanted me to chime in, I could probably do that, but not. You don't want me helping you with your PC selection. Let's see if we got anything else here. Well, hopefully, again, if you join live, thank you so much for joining. If you're watching the replay, I hope you picked up on some few things, and you were able to pick up some tidbits on how to animate in Photoshop. Again, tonight's animation, the main purpose was to get you thinking, or to build up your tool set, really. For me, I like to know how to do things in different programs. I use a lot of different programs. Sometimes I'm in one, I'm like, oh, I just need to create this thing, or I'm in this and I don't want to jump into another one. I know I can do it here. There's so many advantages of, each application has their strength or the things that I would focus on, but being able to use Photoshop, which is kind of a jack of all trades, or a Swiss Army knife of, you can do graphics, you can do photo editing, you can do video editing, you can do video animation, you can do pretty much full-on graphic design, you can do painting. So Photoshop is, to me, the thing that you can do anything in, and being able to do it like a simple animation, or even really kind of a complex. You really could go. There are people who do really good animations in Photoshop, so it can be as basic or as advanced as you want. So just knowing that you can do that is really the goal of tonight, is saying, yeah, I'm in Photoshop, I'm pretty good in Photoshop, or I'm comfortable in Photoshop, and I want to make a simple animation. I don't want to go into Adobe After Effects. Maybe you're intimidated by After Effects, maybe you don't really know your way around it that well. Knowing that you can do something in Photoshop that you need to or that you want to, I think is pretty cool. Okay, so video editing in Photoshop might be a loose, or might not be your most efficient tool, like to do a full video editing. But if you jump into Photoshop, so let me just jump in. So if you're in Photoshop, you can add layers upon layers upon layers. So you can, let's just say I grab this I'm not going to do this, but let's just say that I grab this you can see here that, again, I'm trying to make this so you can see it, or so it makes sense, I should say. I zoomed way out, so let me get it back. Yeah, so you're not going to use, maybe I'm being overzealous. If I was editing a video project, Photoshop is not the tool that I'm thinking of. Oh, I can, do the same thing I would do in Adobe Premiere Pro, or even I use ScreenFlow a lot. But if you look over here in the timeline of Photoshop, you have like a cut tool, you have like the basic tools, you can add transitions. So if I wanted to have, take this and add the little transition here, I could easily do that. I can create, like a little crossfade type thing. I can drag the crossfade in between clips. Let's just say here. Again, you can add text layers. You can add things onto your project to where you can build, you know, like you have a timeline. It's a non-linear timeline, just like you would in other things. Again, it's going to be slightly limited or probably not as efficient if you're doing a video editing project. But you can put stack videos. You can cut videos up. You can make transitions in between them and cut a video together and export it, render it out as a video in Photoshop. So it is capable of doing, you know, quite a bit. Again, it's not my tool of choice if I was doing like a real heavy edit of a video, but it's possible. Yeah, Photoshop has had, quite honestly, Photoshop has had video for, I think it came out in like, I've been using Photoshop now for, I say going on 15 years, and I think Photoshop CS4, maybe CS5, I think might be when they introduced Photoshop or video. So it's been around for a little bit. Let's see, the image effect in the blue shirt is very good. Let's see here if I am able to let me see if I can do something like this. This may or may not make sense, but yeah, so this is not something you would never do, but I'm just showing you that you could create this little transition. If you had like two photos, you could add a fade to black, you could do a fade to white. So you can build a video timeline in Photoshop. I mean, this is a video timeline. You can cut it, you can add clips, you can add effects, you can add text, you can add, you know, intro and outro, you can drag videos onto the timeline. You can make a video project in Photoshop. And again, you're going to be limited to the tools and the, you know, the little cuts and the you know, ripple deletes and the things that you would do in a more dedicated video editor. But when you want to assemble or cut or put together a video, Photoshop is more than capable of doing it. So, and I'm just checking on a couple of things here, and then I'm going to probably start wrapping up tonight unless people have any questions. And then I want to just kind of announce that, or just make it clear that every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, yeah, I'll show you how to do that, Mohammed. Every Monday night, I just want to remind you that I will be doing a live stream on this channel every Monday night. Let's just pull up this screen. Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm in Florida, so that's United States. And every Monday on this channel, I'll be doing a live stream that focuses on a topic each week. I'm going to do a walkthrough, or I'm going to do something that has sort of a theme based, so I can just walk you through how to do something from start to finish. And throughout the week, I'll try to get people, you know, I'll try to see what people are interested in. And, you know, I really want to make this night helpful. So, I mean, the goal is not for me to just share things that I know how to do. I really want to teach things that I think are going to help people create better content or create content or do the things that you want to do online. So every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on this channel, Mike Murphy, CO, I will be doing a live stream, and always open for questions throughout the week. If there's things that you want me to cover or you're not sure about, or things that you're really hoping that I cover, by all means let me know. And I also like to know if there's tutorials or things that you want me to make. By all means, leave comments on one of the videos saying, could you cover something related to this, or I'm not sure how to do this. Even questions, I often will make tutorials based on questions. So I love getting the feedback and the comments and the questions, because I make videos not for me. I mean, I do make them because I like to learn and I like to create, but I make them hoping that they're going to actually help you. So the more I know what you want, or the more I know what help you need, the better I can make stuff that answers your questions or fixes your struggles. So let's jump back into Photoshop before I wrap it up tonight, and I will show you how to render a video. So here I am in Photoshop. We have a looping texture animation. It's brilliant. Actually, I have myself on there, which we don't want. Here, let's add a little razzle dazzle here. I'm going to twirl this open. So let's see here. So this goes like this. All right. Here's a little bonus animation. Ready? I'm going to twirl open the layer. This is the layer of me. Okay? I'm twirling that open. I'm going to click on... this isn't going to work. Let's see if here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to click this out. Let's see if that helps it. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to convert it to a smart object. See if that helps. Well, we'll see if this works. So I'm going to click on the keyframe of the stopwatch to create a keyframe. I'm going to get here. And hold the shift key. Drag that out. So we've got this animation coming in. Hold. Move. Donk. And it's going to push me out. Hold. And that's what animation is all about. Maybe it didn't hit me. Let's just make sure. So now you start getting picky. Come. It did hit. And you want to make sure that the corner is hitting me. So I wanted to make sure that it was actually hitting me. So there's your animation on the fly. We added a little bonus animation. And now we're going to export it. Okay? So let me zoom out to make sure that you can see the top of the screen. That always gets a little tricky. I'm going to go to the very top menu. I don't think you're seeing it, but I'm in the file menu at the very top. And I'm going to go down to export. Okay? So I'm at export. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to choose the very bottom one, render video. Hopefully you can see that. I'm clicking render video. Okay. I'll zoom in on this so you can see the settings a little bit more. Okay. That should be clear for you. Okay. So give it a name. Looping logo. We'll call it that. Okay. Select the folder that you want. I'm just going to select the desktop. Okay. You can create a subfolder if you want it inside of a folder. I'm just going to keep it like this. I'm going to keep it at H.264. You can do QuickTime if you want. I'll keep high quality. You can choose one of these presets. The document size that I created in Photoshop at the very beginning was 1920 by 1080 pixels. So that's automatically choosing it. You could change the format or the size if you wanted to, but I'm going to keep it at the 1920 by 1080. I'll keep the frame rate at 30 frames per second, but you can change that. Everything else is going to stay the same. So we're saving it to the desktop. I'm going to click OK. Give it a few seconds or so, depending on your computer. Let me, you should be able to see that. Let me see if let me go back to your screen here. So let me go current application. So you should be able to see this now. I don't know if you're seeing that. So we have the looping texture animation right here. If I press the space bar, we've got ourselves yeah. Here it comes in, hold, and there we have it. Any questions? Hi, Valerie. Welcome. Yes, I'm doing live every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Tonight's almost done, but I do hope that you join in the future. And if there's anything you want me to cover now or anything you want to join or say or do, or just welcome. Yeah, so... Oh, that's so nice of you. So nice. I appreciate that. What are you working on, Valerie? What do you have going on? Or what is your what is the thing that you work on the most, I should say? Or what do you hope to learn the most? Or what are you trying to learn the more of? Awesome. Awesome. Come to the next one. Every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I appreciate you coming by tonight. And I appreciate everybody who comes by. I don't know why that's coming up, but that was an old video. For whatever reason, that's coming up. This is what I'm doing. This is my view or my setup. If anybody's curious to what I've got going on here. One of these weeks, I'm going to show everybody how to do this, which is fun. It usually gets people confused at what I'm doing. Let me show you. I don't know if I might have gotten rid of it. A bummer. Okay, so this is something that usually gets everybody, but this is Adobe Character Animator, which I hope to be teaching more about and even learning more about, because I am still very much a rookie. I've been using it for a while, but I still have a lot to go. But this is Adobe Character Animator, which for anybody who is creating content, should get your mind thinking of cool things that you might be able to do with a character, especially if you had one that was very realistic to you. this character right now is live, so I'm able to control this guy. That's me, kinda. And whatever I'm doing, I'm moving my head. It's moving its head. It's lip syncing with me. It's following my movement, or I'm following my microphone. So this is a very cool program. Adobe Character Animator comes in the Creative Cloud, and super powerful. Again, you can live stream. You can use it anywhere your webcam is. So if you're on a Zoom call, you could do a character. Pretty cool. If you're a photographer who wants to get back to Photoshop. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Valerie. Yeah, Photoshop. So you're an eCammer. I have been an eCam owner since the very beginning. And then I just sort of always knew that I was going to come back to it. And I do this a lot with things. And I just brought it back into this second round of live streaming that I'm starting up. And God, eCam is amazing. It really is an amazing, amazing tool. I should have been using it the whole time, but it was kind of one of those things. I knew I'd get back to it eventually. I do too many things with too many tools, and I play with things. I forget about things that I have or things that I'm doing. But I knew that that was a tool that I was coming back to, and now I'm back. And I'm still not even using it to its full potential, but man, it's awesome. Photoshop is my oldest program, probably the thing that I know the best, because I was also in the photography industry. I did photography I was a studio manager, so I did more of the back end, the graphic stuff. But Photoshop was the thing that I learned first and foremost, basically, in the Adobe world. And that was the thing that it's so complex. It took me years. I'm still learning it. It's been 15 years. But Photoshop is to me still the thing that I could jump in and do anytime I need to do something quick, or anytime I need to create something. I know I can do it in Photoshop. And then ScreenFlow, I'm glad that you say that ScreenFlow has helped you, because yeah, I try to create the things in ScreenFlow that I've picked up along the way. And I actually have a ScreenFlow class that I've been working on forever. Not consistently, otherwise it would be out, but I hope to put that out fairly soon if I can ever finish it. It's been one of those weights on my shoulder, but hopefully it comes out soon. And yeah, for those people who just want to do kind of a crash course on ScreenFlow, I think that's going to be pretty helpful. So be on the lookout for that. I have a whole bunch of classes that I'm just dying to get out. So I can put together some of these short form tutorials, but put them into more of a cohesive project-based learning, where people can just spend an hour, half hour, an hour just learning something focused without having to do multiple things. So awesome. So happy everybody that came by. Thank you so much for joining. For those that are watching the replay, I hope you got something out of this. And every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, I would love for you to join me during the week between Monday and Sunday. Leave comments, or in the community page, I usually try to post something. If there's something that you want me to cover, or something you want me to do in a future live stream, if you want me to cover some more about gear, or more about how to do something on the live stream, or you name it. Everything I do, I try to do it for the content creator. That's what I'm doing. I'm building an online business and brand, creating online content. And so I'm trying to make content and tutorials and stuff that I've picked up along the way to help other content creators. So as I learn things that I think are helpful for me, or helpful, or if I think they're cool or useful, I try to make a tutorial or try to share something. So your feedback goes a long way. In the comments, keep me motivated. So thank you everybody who always is there and leaving comments, saying nice things of support. That does mean a lot. I read every single comment. I try to reply to every single comment. Some get kind of lost in the shuffle of things, but I do try to comment. So anyways, thank you everybody. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.